Alrighty everyone, welcome back. We are now in the second half of July of 2025, and it's already getting closer to the point where the Disney Company is now reaching a desperate situation. We know that the overall press tour and the marketing campaign for Fantastic Four First Steps is a very big deal for them. They have to make sure that this movie performs well at the box office, or else it's really going to create a big domino effect on the entire rest of the MCU. This is Mike Zero. Subscribe if you're new and like this video to see future updates. You can also follow me at Mike01. I thank you also very much for the great and kind support. Now, Disney CEO Bob Iger, he's been going through a ton of backlash internally over at the Disney Company and exactly what's been going on over there between himself and everyone else on board, right? The board of directors, the executives, and everyone else in between that run Disney Plus, that run the Walt Disney Company entirely. But one thing about all of this is that Bob Iger is in a lot of trouble recently, and this has a lot to do with the fact of what they did with DEI, what they did with, of course, firing specific employees over at the Disney Company, and how the DOJ is now getting involved. Now, what's interesting about all of this is that we know that Bob Iger, as far as I'm concerned, should only be called Bob Liger, because all he does is lie to the general public. He lies to the shareholders. That's what he's greatest, that's what his greatest, overall characteristic is when it comes to how he actually presents himself to the public. That's what he does, right? That's how horrible of a CEO he truly is. But what's interesting about all of this, moving onwards, is the fact that we already know that Bob Iger will say whatever he has to say to string along the shareholders and the core customer base when it comes down to Star Wars, Marvel, or whatever it may be out there. Now, with Disney CEO Bob Iger already going through numerous issues over at the Disney Company after creating a very divisive corporate ladder, after his recent decisions that created tons of internal backlash, one major development now involves how Bob Iger is already facing serious consequences, as now the DOJ is calling for an extensive audit and investigation, not just toward the Disney Company generally speaking, but also specifically targeting Bob Iger, and the one that runs the company with the board over the years, and exactly where all the funds went to for each and every project. And Bob Iger's misuse of diversity, equity, and inclusion as well. Bob Iger is also being investigated for firing those claimed it was a discrimination-related firing after multiple employees spoke up and exposed Disney, both behind the scenes and in the public eye. Now, this investigation and audit that is in the process of being launched by the DOJ against Iger and the Disney Company is already putting not just Iger and the board on edge, but also the top three shareholders have showed a heightened level of concern, such as BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street, are also said to be concerned about the future of the Disney Company, since they are all for DEI. Now, regardless of these recent moves and actions by the DOJ, Bob Iger and the board are still defending their right to take advantage of DEI and to fire those that they feel are not fit right for their jobs and as part of their cost containment plan. Now, this investigation that is now in the process was also launched after it was made well aware that Bob Iger took part in practices, such as announcing a series of films and television shows, and then outright canceling them, and how many employees exposed the fact that this is all a stunt to keep the shareholders in play at the Walt Disney Company to keep interest in the company. Now, guys, let me just say one thing about that. That was a very shady thing that Bob Iger and the board and those running the show over at Disney tend to actually do with Lucasfilm. They did this, of course, also at the Disney live-action remakes. They would announce projects, cancel them, announce projects, cancel them. Does it sound familiar? Well, Lucasfilm definitely was the peak example of all of that, and that's, I'm sure, exactly what's being blamed here. Now, already Bob Iger is gathering a full-on legal team to prepare himself during the early stages of this investigation of multiple discrimination claims and the other listed beforehand. Already Iger has been suddenly trying to convince the board, get this, to allow him to stay as CEO beyond 2026 now, and this is already creating tons of tension and, of course, divisive moments between different board members, even board members that support Bob Iger through and through. Now, to make matters worse about this entire investigation now is that Iger is also refusing to back down on some of his plans to develop other agenda-driven projects that will specifically only hire those that come from diversity, equity, and inclusion as examples. Now, again, like I've said before so many times, Bob Iger is not fit for Disney's CEO. He has made some of the worst decisions in recent years, some of the worst examples that we have seen since 2023, right? We know that he actually created tons of box office failures, ratings disasters across the board. When you look at everything Marvel, Star Wars, etc., it was all Bob Iger, right? Because let's face it, if Bob Iger truly wanted to take advantage of the board and convince them to do something different with Lucasfilm, for example, he could do that, but he really didn't take the time and energy to really try to convince the board to, for example, get rid of Kathleen Kennedy or to end her contract or anything like that. Now look, we know that Kathleen Kennedy is planning to step down, and that is something that's in the talks actively. Whether or not that actually comes to fruition this time, who knows? But what's interesting about this further is the fact that now, in the midst of all of this legal drama, Bob Iger now wants to stay at Disney beyond 2026. And I'm beginning to wonder exactly why. You would think it would be quite the opposite, where he would want to bail on the company in the midst of all this legal drama going on right now. But what's interesting further, alright, is that the DOJ is also looking into the misuse of the hiring process at the Disney Company. The investigation is planned to be a long-winded battle between the DOJ and Disney, as Disney claims that Iger and those high up at Disney did nothing wrong, and how Disney has methods also. And be very well aware about this. They do have methods of making it out to be that everything that they did over the years was completely fine and legal. Now, Iger is reportedly furious with the DOJ also, since they are now looking into his new friendship and political moves with Gavin Newsom and the governor of California, right? And what he has planned with the Disney Company, as Gavin wants to protect Disney and to protect their use of DEI. So we talked about this briefly just yesterday about Gavin's involvement with Bob Iger and how he's going all out as the governor to protect the Disney Company, to protect DEI, to keep DEI in play, not just at the Disney Company, but to also keep it in play throughout the entire film industry, essentially, throughout all of Hollywood. And you're going to hear more about this in the coming days. But look, this just goes to show you that Disney really doesn't know what they're doing anymore. They obviously are only in it for pleasing BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street, and the shareholders that just want to fund this company all out. They are the actual shareholders that love DEI, right? They love ESG, they love all of that nonsense, and this is exactly why Disney is where they are at right now in 2025. Now look, do I think Fantastic Four will be a box office success? I'm not quite so sure right now. I mean, I'm sure it's going to make some money, but will it be a big hit? Something that would be, something of an example of them knocking it out of the park? Who knows? It's really murky right now, but we know one thing is that the marketing campaign has been very lackluster. There's really not all that, a specific level of excitement for a Fantastic Four film where it should be at for a Fantastic Four movie, because let's face it, even though the 2005 and 2007 films were fun popcorn movies, they still weren't exactly what a Fantastic Four movie should be all about, right? But overall, I would like to hear what everyone has to say about Bob Iger and the whole specific legal situation that Bob Iger is dealing with right now and what the Disney Company is facing in the midst of all this. And if you guys did enjoy the content for today, make sure to drop a thumbs up on this video to support the channel, and I will catch you guys later.